На бледно-голубой эмали, какая мыслимо в апреле, березы ветви поднимали и незаметно вечерели. Узор точный и мелкий, застыла тоненькая сетка, как на фарфоровой тарелке, рисунок высеченный метко.
This is the epigraph to the movie, where the poet Osif Mandelstam talks about the relationship of an artist and animal. Monologue about animal, kings and queens. Portrait of a painter, Alexei Maximov.
Париж, 1890 год. Бутик. Какой-то бутик. Рено.
Как он тебе к тебе попал?
Секонд-хенд, да?
Да, секонд-хенд. Леш, как он к тебе попал, интересно?
По наследству.
Paris, 1890, boutique.
Я один могу одеть только так. Вот.
I alone can fit it, and I can only get in it, swinging from side to side. If I try to put it on as a jacket, it will rip. It's such a fine tailoring job. I also had a shirt with laces, but now it's gone.
Так. Вот надо не забыть вот палку поправить.
Well, it feels great to be in my slippers. Few artists and I got together in a kitchen in St. Petersburg, on the Petrovskaya side, in the art studio of Rima Yunisheva, for a cup of tea. All of a sudden, Rima says to me, "You ought to paint kings and queens and travel around the world." It happened so that we got an audience with the queen very fast, which is very unusual, as I understand now. We got an audience only 3 months prior to the portrait sitting, and it happened like this. Without any knowledge of English, my partner and I came to London. First, we had a meeting with Russian embassy, hoping they would help us pass on some paperwork from Moscow to the director of the Queen's art collection. We were hoping that the Russian embassy would help us. Fairly quickly, we got an appointment with the director of Queen's art collection. He received us very well, but he said that this is not in his authority to speak with the Queen about the portrait sitting audience, although he promised to introduce us to Sir Kenneth Scott, private secretary of the Queen, who organizes similar events. In a few days, we did meet Sir Kenneth Scott. All of this took place at the Buckingham Palace. Sir Kenneth heard our request and replied, "This is not possible. The exhibition in Tower, for which you wish to paint this portrait, will occur in 2 years, but Her Majesty's schedule is full 5 years in advance."
Через 2 года, а расписание у королевы расписано на ближайшие 5 лет. Ну, казалось, ситуация уже проиграна полностью.
After hearing this, it seemed to me that our project was doomed, because it will be impossible to wait for 5 years. When all seemed lost, my partner decided to give it a last try. To our luck, Sir Kenneth Scott understood Russian, and he said to Sir Kenneth Scott, "How could you, Secretary of the Queen, go against Her Majesty's will?" Sir Kenneth Scott became puzzled. He thought to himself, did he misunderstood something? Has he heard him right? And said, "What makes you think that I go against Her Majesty's will?" Explaining to you that her schedule is booked 5 years in advance. To this, my partner replied, "We are preparing this painting for Kremlin's exhibition in Tower, and the same exhibition happens to be under the patronage of the Queen. Kremlin's museum wishes that this exhibition would exhibit a portrait of a queen done by modern Russian painters. And you are not helping us. Sir Kenneth Scott was so stunned by this logic and replied, I will do my best to help you with the audience. 1 month later, we were very surprised when we received an invitation. Later, we learned that Sir Kenneth Scott spoke to the court painter, Theo Ramos, who had a portrait audience March 3rd, and asked him if a few Russian painters could work with him at the same time, and Theo agreed. I thought I wasn't nervous at all. There was not much to worry about. How could I, 20 years ago, imagine how difficult it is to get a portrait audience with a queen? I thought to myself that we received an appointment in 3 months. Very well. Very convenient. Possibly it was luck. Now, I understand this was a miracle. Not so long ago, I read an autobiography of some famous American photographer. He's very famous, but now for some reason his name slipped my mind. This photographer photographed all the celebrities of his time, actors, politicians, but he never had a chance to photograph a queen in the Buckingham Palace. Finally, after years of negotiations, his booking manager managed to schedule a photo shoot with the queen. Well, this photographer learned that he was appointed to the photo shoot with the queen half a year in advance. And for that half a year, this photographer could not sleep.
Я сказал, что я думаю, что я не волновался вообще. На самом деле, наверное, это не так. Я помню, что мне надо было вот уже садиться на поезд и выезжать из Дюссельдорфа.
I mentioned that I wasn't worried at all. In reality, perhaps, that wasn't entirely true. I remember the day when I was supposed to take a train from Düsseldorf to London. All of a sudden, I got a really high fever. In a few hours, I managed to drop the fever, but I was late for my train. So I had to take the next train, which had an overnight stop in Brussels. I had to spend a few hours at the train station with bumps at night time. I had such a weary feeling. I arrived at the Brussels from Düsseldorf, where there were lots of lights and people. I find myself surrounded by bums, which sleep on the benches and on the floor, and I think to myself that tomorrow I will have an audience with the Queen. Just in 2 hours, I will take a train, then a boat, then I will be at the Buckingham Palace.
Я должен отсюда вот через 2 часа сесть на другой поезд, потом на паром и, значит, быть во дворце. Королеве было интересно посмотреть, что там получилось у русского.
The Queen was curious to see what did the Russian artists drew. Imagine this scene. I'm standing there drawing the Queen, and I see that she's intrigued, but she cannot peek at my drawing. I slightly turn the drawing towards her. She sees the drawing, but she's not asking me to show it. And in return, I don't blatantly show it to her. At the same time, I understand that she sees the drawing. The Queen smiles and offers me to sign the drawing, and carefully wrote, Elizabeth, March 31st, 1992. This signature is a big mystery to me. 10 years later, to the day, I remembered about this drawing. I had a dream, and in this dream, I saw an English garden, and it seemed to me that I saw a silhouette of a Queen Mother there. The same morning, I took a close look at this drawing, and when I looked at the date, 31st of March, 1992, I realized that today's date is 31st of March, 2002. Exactly 10 years later, I think to myself, how interesting. I had a dream about the Queen exactly 10 years later. And then I was so surprised when I heard the news on the radio that the Queen Mother has died on the same day.
Услышав по радио информацию, или по радио, или в интернете, сейчас точно не помню, что в этот день королева умерла. Ну, как раз после того, когда королева подписала рисунок, видимо, какие-то воспоминания у нее.
When the Queen signed my drawing, perhaps she remembered other drawings of her, and she asked if I would like to see the drawing of her done by. Later, I found out that it was done in 1923, when Mother Queen was only 23 years old. At that time, she was only a princess.
Она вышла замуж за Георга, короля Георга. Вот перед поездкой в Лондон была сделана такая шкатулка с миниатюрами. Вот. Ну, мне показалось, что это правильно, если перед сеансом, ну, показать.
Before I traveled to London, I had this casket made for my miniatures. I thought that this would be right to show to the sitter what their drawing would look like in the end. I took this casket with me to England, Holland, and Norway, and all of these miniatures in the casket were held by all of my sitters. I was curious to see their reaction to my work.
Отнесутся к моим миниатюрам. Елизавета II сказала, да, у меня тоже так.
Elizabeth II said to me that she also had such a master of miniatures, perhaps an old British master of miniatures. I have seen some photos of Elizabeth II wearing miniature with her portrait on it. This miniature of our Russian Empress Catherine II was in the hands of several monarchs.
Он побывал в руках нескольких монархов. Как-то так получилось, что вообще вот какие-то ниточки связи возникли с Питером, но уже не с церковной областью. Мне очень понравился.
From 1978, I have decided that at some point I will move to St. Petersburg. And in 1980, I moved from Moscow to St. Petersburg.
Нет, да, сейчас. Это раньше, 78-й год. С тех пор у меня появилась мысль, что, может быть, когда-то я буду жить в Питере. Я стал здесь часто бывать, а в 80-м году вообще переехал из Москвы в Петербург.
Вот уже как камеру включили, тут же сразу глоток кофе, он в горле встал. А это вообще интересная очень история. Мой отец Александр.
Александр.
А я Алексей Александр.
Another curious moment that I remember was in Gaga, Belgium. I booked a hotel in Gaga. Later, just before my departure, I received a call from the secretary of a queen. I wanted to tell him where will I be staying in Gaga. To my surprise, he said, I know where you will be staying. So I asked him, when will we meet? "We'll meet for brunch at the bar stand," he replied. "How will we recognize each other?" I asked. "Oh, that will be easy. Next morning, I come down for brunch. The restaurant is full, and I see a person at the door, and I immediately understand that this person is the secretary of Queen of Holland. Like all artists looking like one another, this person looked like a typical secretary. His coat, his briefcase, all of it gave him away. Perhaps the same way he recognized me. What was surprising to me was that some time ago, the secretary worked at the Russian embassy and had a very good Russian, which made our meeting easy, but not perfect Russian, as I soon found out.
Ну, прекрасно, вот не совсем прекрасно, но...
At some point of our conversation, the secretary asked, "What about the payment?" Word payment in Russian is very similar to the word dress. I was confused by this question, and I replied, "Would you like to order some coffee first?" He replied, "The coffee is being made, but let's talk about the payment." In my mind, I tried to analyze. Payment for me? The queen will pose for me and pay me? That sounds strange. If it's I who has to pay, well, that will be impossible because I wouldn't be able to afford it. I don't know how much would the queen charge for her time. For the last time, I tried to change the conversation, but he insists. And when I found out myself cornered in, I tell the secretary, "This wasn't in the contract, so there will be no payment." Then the secretary looked to me so confused and said to me, "How is this possible? A queen will pose without a dress?"
Королева вообще без платья? А это был первый король, с которым мы общались.
The first king I worked with was King Harald V of Norway. There was no translator this time. We talked with him about yachts, about his trip to Moscow, and I mentioned to the king that it was too bad that he wasn't wearing his court dress coat. The king replied, "No problem. We will resolve this. Please come tomorrow, exactly the same time." We came the next day, and to our surprise, we saw a dress coat posing for us without a king. Guardsman, the same height and weight, was wearing the dress coat. Funny thing was that the king was talking to us alone. The dress coat, on the other hand, was guarded by two guards, watching carefully to make sure that not a piece of dust would fall on it, and to make sure that we wouldn't touch it.
Два хранителя, которые следили за то, что не дай бог, какая-нибудь пылинка на него упадет, или что мы до него дотронемся. Когда я малик занялся?
When did I start doing animal? Third year of school. Animal is the fusion of element. Animal is born in fire, like water, it's very fluid. It reflects the sky. It looks like the sky. Blue and ultramarine are very organic colors for animal.
Как вода, она преломляет свет, отражает небо. Она похожа на небо. Ей органичны голубые, синие, фиолетовые цвета.
This song is about dear home.
Я нарисую старый дом, десну и лес, простор обжитый. Большеголовое дитя сидит на лавочке, свистя. В свою свистульку из ракиты. Но время не вернуть назад и не бежать босым по лужам. Отец, глядящий мне вослед, недавно мною был отпет, а храм отхожим местом служит. Споткнулся, замер карандаш, не по своей, наверно, воле. Гляжу в окно на белый свет, и дома нет, и храма нет. Бумага чистая до боли.